part of the Ruth study, but it sets it up for us. Next week we begin to talk about Ruth, hunger and fullness, and it's an interesting story that we're going to spend just 4 weeks on. But the story of Ruth is actually set in the days of what we call the Judges. And that's outlined for us how they got there in Judges 1. But as I was reading this text, the profound thought came to me that I want to share with you this morning. And I want to begin with looking at Judges, the book of Judges. And look with me at chapter 2. The book of Judges, chapter 2. And I want to begin reading at verse 6. Judges chapter 2 and verse 6. When Joshua dismissed the people of Israel went each to his inheritance to take possession of the land. And the people served the Lord all the days of Joshua and all the days of the elders who outlived Joshua, who had seen all the great work that the Lord had done for Israel. And Joshua, the son of Nun, the servant of the Lord, died at the age of 110 years. And they buried him within the boundaries of his inheritance in Timnath-Heres, in the hill country of Ephraim, north of the mountain of Gash. And all that generation also gathered to their fathers. Now here's the point. And there arose another generation after them who did not know the Lord or the work that he had done for Israel. There arose another generation after them who did not know the Lord or the work that he had done for Israel. And here's the point. We are one generation away from total apostasy. Think about it. Those of us in this room who have done everything possible as parents to talk about the faith, to lead our children to faith. Some of you that I'm looking at know the pain of seeing a child or grandchildren that care nothing about spiritual things of the Lord. They're in their own world. Excuse me. If that is true, think of the effect of children or friends, neighbors growing up and never hearing about the gospel. I remember in our last church, we had a person who came to church. I don't think he was ever in leadership. Came to church for numbers of years, decades. And then one day, the guy that worked next to him, at the lathe next to him, showed up in church, was absolutely shocked that he was there, that he was a Christian. Knew nothing of it at all. We are one generation away from total apostasy. One generation. And I was thinking of that when I think of our nation. Heard yesterday on the news that a poll, and I don't know the accuracy of all of these polls that are taken, but at least this one suggested that Americans today feel less free than they have at any other time in their life. Less free. Why is that? In fact, in that same poll, we are now ranked in the world number 24, country number 24, as far as freedom. New Zealand, places like New Zealand, Cambodia, the Arab Emirates, all top the list. But our own nation, the nation that was built on the concept of freedom, dwindling each day as we go by. And that's the reason for the Festival of Hope. And that's the reason that these opportunities are given to us, so that people know the Lord. We are one generation away from total apostasy. Later on in Israel's history, remember Hezekiah prayed for 13 more years of life, or prayed for more years of life. God gave him 13 years. In that time period, in that extended time period of life, where he bargained with God for another 13 years, in that time period, a son was born to him by the name of Manasseh, who became king. And while he repented during his reign, he led Israel into some of the worst apostasy. He led Israel into the sacrificing of their own children to the altars of the Baals, and totally decimated a whole generation. What I want you to see is that we are living in those kinds of times, where whole generations are being decimated. I pastored a church once where, because of the legalism, the succeeding generation, most of that generation had fallen away from the gospel. One generation. How did this happen? There's a number of reasons, and I don't want to focus on because I know the struggle of parents when you have children that are not following the Lord, the pain of that. And the promise of God is that He will bring them back. Train up a child the way he should go, and He's already won't depart from it. As long as they're living, there's still time. God's grace is able. The book of Hebrews says that God can save how far? To the uttermost. The uttermost. And that is a hope that we have. But how did this happen for Israel? It is a warning to us, not just about our children, but about people with whom we work. The generations, the people that we have contact, with which we have contact. How did all of this take place? Two things. Number one, Israel became complacent in the mission. They became complacent in the mission. There's two matters here. Notice what the verse said, that last verse that I read said. Its first thing it said was, they did not know the Lord. They did not know the Lord. Ever see on these late night television shows? I don't know who they are. What's the guy that just got fired, had the long chin? Jay Leno, that guy. Some other people, I don't know. But they send people out on the streets and ask them, do you know who the vice president is? Or they'll show them a picture of the vice president. They have no clue who they are. People that, where have these people been all their lives? Probably in the clubs, but I remember when the Franklin Graham Wesley White Crusade